The morning started like any other on the research station. New Horizon. Dr. Lisa Martinez sipped her coffee while watching the stars through the observation deck windows. She had been working at this remote station for 3 years now, listening to space signals and hoping to find something interesting. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional pulsar ping. Lisa walked to her workstation and turned on the computers. The screens lit up with wave patterns and frequency charts. She put on her headphones and began scanning through the night's recordings. Static filled her ears, mixed with the usual hums and beeps from distant stars. It was about to switch to a different frequency when something made her pause. There was a pattern in the static. It was faint, but definitely artificial. Lisa adjusted the filters and played it again. The signal was clearly made by intelligent beings, not by any natural space phenomenon. Her heart started beating faster as she realized what this might mean. After decades of searching, humanity might have finally found proof that they were not alone in the universe. She called for Commander Jake Sullivan, the station's military liaison. Jake was a tall man with graying hair who had served on deep space missions for 20 years. He had seen strange things in his career, but nothing like this. When he heard the signal, his expression grew serious. "How long has this been coming in?" Jake asked, leaning over Lisa's shoulder to look at the data. "The computer picked it up about 6 hours ago," Lisa replied. "But it's been going on much longer than that? Look at these timestamps. This signal has been repeating for at least 2 weeks." Jake frowned as he studied the wave patterns. "Can you clean it up? Make it clearer?" Lisa worked on the signal for the next hour, using every tool she had to remove the static and interference. What they heard made both of them stop breathing for a moment. The signal was not just a simple ping or mathematical sequence. It was a distress call, and somehow they could understand parts of it. The aliens were using universal concepts like prime numbers and mathematical constants to build a basic translation framework. Mixed in with the math were sounds that could only be described as crying or pleading. "They're asking for help, Lisa," whispered Jake. "They're dying." The message told a terrible story. The beings called themselves the Volani, and their star was dying faster than they had expected. Their world, which they called Serenity Prime, would be destroyed within months, not the years they had originally calculated. They had sent the message to something called the Galactic Peaceful Alliance, but the response had been that official help would not arrive in time. Jake sat down heavily in a nearby chair.
"How many of them are there?"
Lisa worked through more of the mathematical data embedded in the signal. "From what I can tell, about 40 million beings. They have some ships, but not enough for everyone. And their ships seem to be built for short trips, not for crossing the void between star systems. We have to report this to Earth Command," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lisa looked at him.
"How long will that take?"
"The committees, the debates, the authorization processes. Even if they approve a mission, how long to organize it?" Jake knew the answer. Earth Command was cautious about everything, especially first contact situations. They would want to study the signal for months, form committees, debate the risks. By the time they decided to act, the Volani would be dead. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. Lisa pulled up a star chart on her screen. "The signal is coming from the Beta Centauri region. It's only about 3 weeks' travel with our fastest ships. We have mining vessels, cargo haulers, even a few military escorts in this sector. Lisa, we can't just decide to make first contact on our own. The protocols don't cover this situation," Lisa interrupted. "We're not talking about a planned first contact mission. This is a rescue operation." Jake was quiet for several minutes, staring at the signal data. He had been in the military long enough to know the difference between following orders and doing what was right. Sometimes they were the same thing. Sometimes they were not. "What kind of ships do we have available?" he asked finally. Lisa's fingers flew over the keyboard as she accessed shipping manifests and fleet positions. "There's the mining ship Dakota Belle, captained by Amy Carter. She's got a crew of 30, and her ship is built for heavy work in dangerous areas." The Cargo hauler Big Sky is nearby with Captain Bobby Chen in command. And there's a military patrol ship, the Defender, with Lieutenant Katie Foster. Oh, that's not much of a rescue fleet, Jake said. It's what we have, Lisa replied, and from what I'm reading about these Villani, they might not need much. Their message suggests they're a peaceful people. They're not asking for weapons or military support. They just need transport off their dying world. Jake made his decision. He opened a secure communication channel and began sending messages to the ship captains Lisa had identified. Within hours, responses started coming back. Reaction was unanimous. Every captain volunteered immediately. Captain Amy Carter's response was typical. 40 million people are going to die, and we're close enough to help. We leave in 6 hours. While Jake coordinated with the ship captains, Lisa continued working. On the alien signal, she discovered that the Villani had been very thorough in their message. They had included star charts, information about their biology, and even some basic cultural details. What she read made her heart ache. The Villani were herbivores who had never experienced war or violence. They had built a civilization based on harmony and artistic expression. Their cities were described as works of art, with buildings that looked more like sculptures than practical structures. They had reached the stars not through military conquest or competition, but through cooperation and shared dreams. They were also physically fragile compared to humans. They were taller, but much thinner, with delicate bone structures. Their ships were built for comfort and beauty, not for survival in hostile environments. The idea of traveling through the dangerous regions of space between star systems terrified them. Jake, Lisa called out, "You need to see this." You had found a section of the message that described the Galactic Peaceful Alliance. It was an organization of several alien species that had banded together to share knowledge and maintain peace. According to the Villani, most spacefaring civilizations were peaceful herbivores or gentle omnivores. The concept of predator species reaching the stars was almost unknown. "You don't know what humans are," Lisa said quietly. "You've never encountered anything like us." Jake read through the data. Humans were listed in the galactic databases as inhabitants of a Class 12 Deathworld. Most species considered such planets completely uninhabitable. The few references to humanity described them as concerning and potentially dangerous. "So when we show up to rescue them," Jake said slowly, "they're going to think we're monsters." "Probably," Lisa agreed. "But they're still going to be dead if we don't try." The next morning, a small fleet of human ships gathered at the edge of the New Horizon system. They were not elegant vessels. The mining ships were scarred from asteroid impacts and solar radiation. The cargo haulers were purely functional, built for carrying maximum loads with minimum comfort. Even the military escort looked worn and battle-tested. But they were strong ships, built by humans for human space. They could survive in environments that would destroy more delicate vessels. Their crews were experienced in dealing with emergencies, equipment failures, and hostile conditions. They were exactly what the situation required. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Lisa sent one final message to Earth Command. She knew there would be consequences when they returned. There might be court-martials, demotions, or worse. But 40 million innocent beings were about to die, and humanity had the power to save them. Sometimes Lisa thought doing the right thing was more important than following the rules. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying hope to a distant world that had never imagined salvation could come from such unlikely saviors. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system 3 weeks later. Captain Amy Carter stood on the bridge of the Dakota Belle, looking at her screens with amazement. The alien ships that came to meet them were like nothing she had ever seen. The Villani vessels looked more like floating crystals than spaceships.
Ow.
They were transparent in places, with smooth curves and delicate structures that seemed to catch and bend the light from their dying star. They moved through space with graceful, flowing motions that reminded Amy of dancers or sea creatures swimming through water in contrast. Her own ship looked like it had been through a war. The Dakota Belle was built for mining asteroids and working in dangerous conditions. Her hull was scratched and dented from countless impacts with space rocks. Welding scars covered places where repairs had been made, The ship was functional and tough, but certainly not beautiful. "Captain Carter," came a voice over the radio from the Defender. "This is Lieutenant Katie Foster. I'm seeing 12 alien ships approaching our position. They're maintaining a safe distance, but they seem curious about us." Amy opened a communication channel to the alien ships. She had been practicing with the translation protocols that Dr. Martinez had sent, but she was still nervous about making first contact with another species. "This is Captain Amy Carter of the human vessel Dakota Bell," she said slowly and clearly. "We received your distress signal and came to help with your evacuation." There was a long pause before a response came. "Back." The voice was soft and musical, with strange harmonics that the translation software struggled to process. "We greet you, beings from the death world called Earth. I am harmony singer Veltar of the Villani people. We are grateful that someone heard our call, but we must confess confusion. Our records indicate that your species is classified as dangerous predators." Amy looked at her communications officer, a young man named Danny Wright. He shrugged and gestured for her to continue. "We are here to help," Amy said. "We know your star is dying, and your people need to be evacuated. We brought ships to assist with the rescue." Another pause, this one even longer. Amy could hear what sounded like multiple alien voices talking rapidly in the background before Veltar spoke. "Again, we invite you to send a small delegation to our command ship for a meeting. We must discuss the situation and understand your intentions." Amy chose her team carefully. She brought Dr. Lisa Martinez, who had been working with the alien signals. The longest, and engineer Bobby Chen, who understood both human and theoretical alien technology. She also brought Chief Medical Officer Laura Davis, thinking that the aliens might want to know about human biology for safety reasons. The alien command ship was even more impressive up close. As Amy and her team flew their shuttle toward it, they could see that the entire hull was carved with intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories, or maybe record history. Gardens were visible through transparent sections, with alien plants, growing in zero gravity in ways that seemed impossible. When they docked, Amy was surprised by how large everything was. The corridors were built for beings much taller than humans, with high ceilings and wide passages. Everything was curved and smooth, with no sharp edges or corners anywhere. Soft lights glowed from the walls themselves, creating a peaceful, dreamlike atmosphere. The Villani who met them were tall and thin, standing nearly 8 feet in height, but weighing probably less than most humans. Their skin was pale blue-gray and seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. They had large eyes that took up much of their face, and their movements were slow and graceful. Veltar was waiting for them in what appeared to be a meeting room, though it looked more like a garden pavilion. Other Villani were present, floating slightly above the floor in what Amy realized were their equivalent of chairs. "Welcome to our vessel," Veltar said, and Amy could hear the fear in the alien's voice despite the translator. "Please sit wherever you feel comfortable." The humans found places on what seemed to be growing benches made from some kind of plant material. Amy noticed that all the Villani were staying as far away from the humans as possible, while still remaining in the same room. "We want to thank you for coming," Veltar continued, "though we must admit we are uncertain about your species. Our databases contain very little information about humans, and what they do contain is disturbing."
Ow.
Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "What kind of information do you have about us?" One of the other Villani spoke up, their voice trembling slightly. "Your world is listed as a Class 12 death world. Such planets are considered completely uninhabitable by civilized species. The database says your people evolved from predator animals and still retain aggressive tendencies. There are warnings that humans should be avoided unless absolutely necessary." Bobby Chen laughed, which made all the aliens flinch and move further away. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I wasn't laughing at you. It's just funny to hear Earth described that way. I mean, it's not wrong exactly, but it's our home. We don't think of it as a death world. You find humor in descriptions of deadly environments?" Another Villani asked, sounding shocked. "Well, yeah," Bobby replied. "I mean, my job is mining asteroids and radioactive fields near unstable stars. If you can't laugh at danger, you'd go crazy." The Villani looked at each other with what Amy was beginning to recognize as expressions of terror. Dr. Martinez quickly jumped in to try to calm the situation. "I think there may be some misunderstandings here," she said. "Yes, humans evolved differently than you did. Our world has more challenges and dangers than yours probably does. But that doesn't mean we're evil or violent toward innocent people." "But your species hunts and kills other animals for food," Veltar said. "How can beings who take life be trusted not to take more life?" Laura Davis decided this was a good time to explain human biology. "We are omnivores," she said. "We can eat both plants and meat. Many humans choose to eat only plants, actually. But our bodies are designed to be able to digest both types of food. It's just how we evolved. You have a choice in whether to kill or not to kill, and some of you choose to kill anyway." The Villani asking the question sounded horrified. "We don't kill people," Laura said quickly. "We would never hurt another intelligent being, talking about animals, non-thinking creatures. All life is sacred," Veltar said quietly. "The idea of ending any life deliberately is difficult for us to understand." Amy could see that this conversation was going badly. The cultural differences were too large to bridge quickly, and they didn't have time for a long discussion about human nature. The Villani star was getting more unstable by the day. "Look," she said, standing up, which made all the aliens move back even further. "I understand that we seem scary to you. Our species developed differently. But we came here to help, not to hurt anyone. 40 million of your people are going to die if we don't work together." "But how do we know you won't harm us?" asked one of the Villani. "Your people carry weapons. We detected energy signatures on your ships that could only come from military systems." Lieutenant Katie Foster's voice came over Amy's communicator. "Captain, we've got a problem. I'm reading massive solar instability from their star. The stellar collapse is accelerating faster than their original estimates." Amy looked at the Villani leaders. "How much time do you think you have?" Veltar consulted with the other aliens for a moment. "Our scientists believe we have perhaps 2 months before the star becomes too unstable to survive. And maybe 4 months before complete collapse." "Your scientists are wrong," Bobby Chen said bluntly. "I've been studying the data since we arrived. You've got maybe 6 weeks before evacuation becomes impossible, and 8 weeks before your world is destroyed." The silence in the room was complete. Amy could see the terror in the aliens' large eyes as they processed this information. "Even if we wanted to trust you," Veltar said finally, "our evacuation ships are not designed for the long journey to other star systems. They are beautiful, but fragile. We built them for short trips between worlds in our system, not for crossing the dangerous void of deep space. That's why we're here," Amy said. "Our ships are ugly, but they're tough. We can modify your vessels to handle the journey, or we can transport your people in our ships. We have the technology and experience to get everyone to safety." "But at what cost?" asked another Villani. "What do you want in return for this help? What do humans gain from saving us?" Amy looked around at her team, then back at the aliens. "We gain the knowledge that we helped save 40 million lives."
Oh, no.
"That's enough." The Villani stared at the humans in confusion. The concept that someone would risk their lives to help strangers, with no expectation of reward, was as alien to them as their crystal ships were to the humans. "We need time to discuss this among our people," Veltar said. "But we may not have a choice. If your assessment of our star's stability is correct, then you are indeed our only hope for survival." As the human delegation returned to their shuttle, Amy could hear the Villani talking rapidly among themselves in their musical language. She didn't need a translator to understand the tone. They were terrified of the humans, but they were even more terrified of dying. The first contact between species was not going as anyone had planned, but it was the beginning of something that would change both civilizations forever. The next morning, Engineer Bobby Chen floated through the corridors of a Villani evacuation ship with a growing sense of disbelief. The alien vessel was beautiful beyond words, but it was also completely wrong for what they needed to do. Everything was designed for comfort and beauty rather than survival. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that sparkled in the light but looked fragile enough to crack if someone bumped into it too hard. The corridors were wide and graceful, but they wasted enormous amounts of space. The life support systems were works of art with plants and flowing water features, but they were also incredibly complex and delicate. "This isn't going to work," Bobby muttered to himself as he examined the ship's main power system. It was elegant and efficient, but it had no backup systems and no redundancy. If any part of it failed during a long journey, everyone on board would die. His assistant Carlos Rodriguez floated up beside him carrying a toolkit. "It's like they built these ships to sail on a calm lake, not cross an ocean in a storm," Carlos said. "Everything here is designed to break if you look at it wrong." Bobby opened his communicator. "Captain Carter, we need to talk. We need to get some Villani engineers over here to see what we're dealing with." An hour later, Bobby was standing in the main cargo bay of the alien ship with Captain Amy Carter, several human technicians, and a group of very nervous Villani engineers. The aliens stayed as far away from the humans as possible, while still being able to hear the conversation. "The problem is basic design philosophy," Bobby explained, gesturing at the beautiful but impractical ship around them. "Your people built these ships for short trips in safe, controlled conditions. We need to modify them for a journey through some of the most dangerous regions of space." One of the Villani engineers, who called himself Song of Stars, spoke up in his musical voice. "These vessels represent centuries of artistic and technical development. They are perfectly balanced works of engineering and aesthetic beauty. Surely minor adjustments will be sufficient." Bobby looked at Amy, who nodded for him to continue. "I'm afraid not. To survive the journey to the new world, we need to strip out about 70% of the decorative elements to make room for more passengers. We need to install backup life support systems, radiation shielding, and emergency supplies. We need to reinforce the whole structure and upgrade the power systems." The Villani engineers made sounds that the translator interpreted as distress. Song of Stars' large eyes grew even larger. "You want to destroy our ships? Turn them into ugly, functional boxes like your own vessels. We want to turn them into ships that can keep your people alive," Amy said firmly. "Beautiful doesn't matter if everyone dies before they reach safety." Another Villani engineer floated forward. "But the harmony of the design will be completely lost. These ships are not just transportation. They are expressions of our culture, our values, our way of seeing the universe." Carlos held up a piece of decorative crystal paneling that he had removed from a wall. "This is very pretty," he said, "but it weighs about 50 pounds and serves no functional purpose. In the space it takes up, we could fit life support equipment for 20 people." "You cannot simply measure everything by its practical use," Song of Stars protested. "Beauty has value. Art has meaning. These ships carry the soul of our civilization." Bobby tried to keep his patience. "Your civilization won't have a soul if everyone is dead. We're not trying to destroy your culture. We're trying to save your lives." The argument continued for another hour, the Villani engineers insisting that the modifications would ruin their ships, and the human engineers explaining that the modifications were absolutely necessary for survival. Finally, Amy called for a break and asked to speak privately with the human team. "How bad is it really?" she asked when they were alone. "Worse than I thought," Bobby admitted. "These ships are basically flying art galleries. They're designed to impress people, not to function in emergency conditions. The life support systems alone are completely inadequate for the number of people we need to evacuate. Can we make them work?" Amy asked. "Maybe," Carlos said. "If we gut most of the interior and rebuild it from scratch, God, it's going to be ugly, cramped, and uncomfortable. These people are used to traveling in luxury. What we're talking about is more like traveling in a cargo container." Amy made her decision. "Do it. Make the modifications we need. If the Villani don't like it, they can stay here and die beautifully." Word of the human modifications spread quickly through the Villani fleet. Within hours, protests were coming in from all over their society. Cultural leaders complained that the humans were destroying priceless artworks, religious figures said. That altering the ships violated sacred principles of harmony and balance. Even ordinary citizens sent messages expressing their horror at what was being done to their beautiful vessels. Dr. Lisa Martinez found herself trying to explain human thinking to increasingly upset aliens. "We understand that your ships are important to you culturally," she said to a group of Villani leaders. "But we have a saying on Earth: You can't eat beauty, and you can't breathe art. Survival comes first. But what is survival without meaning? Asked Harmony Singer Veltar. If we lose everything that makes us who we are, what is the point of continuing to exist? You can rebuild your culture, Lisa replied. You can create new art, new beautiful things. But you can't do any of that if you're dead. Meanwhile, the human work crews were making progress on the ship modifications. They worked in shifts around the clock, tearing out decorative elements and installing practical systems. The Volani watched in horror as their graceful ships were transformed into functional but ugly vessels designed for survival. The most dramatic moment came when pilot Danny Wright took a modified Volani ship on a test flight through a radiation field near their dying star. The original ship would have been destroyed instantly by the stellar radiation. But the human modifications allowed it to survive conditions that would kill most galactic species. The radiation levels out there would cook most organic life in minutes, Danny reported over the radio. But with the new shielding and the backup life support systems, this ship can handle it. It's not pretty, but it works. The Volani who witnessed the test flight were amazed and horrified at the same time. They had never imagined that anyone would voluntarily fly into such dangerous conditions. And the fact that humans did it casually was deeply disturbing to them. Dr. Martinez worked with the Volani scientists to plan the evacuation routes. The aliens wanted to take the safest possible path to their new world, even if it took much longer. The humans argued for a more direct route that would cut weeks off the journey time. The direct route passes through 3 unstable star systems and 2 regions of high cosmic radiation, protested Chief Science Singer Talvin. No civilized being would risk such a journey. No civilized being needs to, replied human navigator Katie Foster. But we're not civilized by your standards. We're from a death world, remember? Dangerous conditions don't scare us as much as they scare you. But what if something goes wrong? What if ships are damaged or destroyed? Katie's expression grew serious. Then some people might die so that others can live. That's how triage works. You save as many as you can, even if you can't save them all. The concept of acceptable losses was completely alien to the Volani way of thinking. Their society had been built on the principle that every life was sacred and that no one should ever be sacrificed for the good of others. The human willingness to make such calculations terrified them almost as much as their dying star. But as the days passed, and the stellar instability continued to increase, even the most reluctant Volani began to accept that they had no choice. The beautiful ships that had once carried them gracefully between worlds were being transformed into crude but functional survival vessels. Their elegant society was being forced to adopt the harsh practicality of their rescuers. The humans worked tirelessly, barely sleeping, as they raced to prepare the evacuation fleet. They ignored the alien complaints about destroyed art and ruined aesthetics, focusing only on the essential task of keeping 40 million beings alive during a journey across hostile space. As Bobby Chen put it to one particularly upset Volani, "Artist, you can hate us for making your ships ugly. You can complain about our crude solutions and our lack of appreciation for beauty. But when this is all over, you'll be alive to create new beautiful things. That's what matters." The modification work continued around the clock, with humans and reluctant Volani working together to prepare for an evacuation that would test the limits of both species' endurance and determination. The evacuation began 3 days earlier than planned when the Volani star suddenly released a massive solar flare that destroyed 2 of their orbital stations. Captain Amy Carter watched the readings on her screen with growing alarm as the stellar collapse accelerated beyond all their worst predictions. How many people were on those stations? She asked Dr. Martinez, who was coordinating with the Volani. Emergency command. Lisa's face was pale as she relayed the information. About 15,000 on each station. They had no warning. The stations were just vaporized in seconds. Amy opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Carter. We're moving to emergency evacuation procedures immediately. The star is becoming unstable faster than anyone predicted. We need to get everyone off this world in the next 4 weeks, not 6. The news spread panic through the Volani population. 40 million beings who had lived their entire lives in peace and safety were suddenly faced with the reality that their world was about to be destroyed. Families gathered their few allowed possessions while emergency crews worked to load as many people as possible onto the modified evacuation ships. The human crews pushed themselves beyond their normal limits. Engineer Bobby Chen had not slept more than 2 hours at a time in the past week as he supervised the final modifications to the Villani ships. His hands shook from exhaustion as he installed the last radiation shield on a transport vessel. "Bobby, you need to rest," Carlos Rodriguez told him as they finished welding a support beam into place. "You're going to collapse if you keep this up." 30,000 people are going on this ship, Bobby replied, checking the seal on the radiation. "Shield one more time. If this shielding fails during the journey, they all die. I'll rest when everyone is safe." The loading process was a nightmare of logistics and cultural misunderstanding. The Villani were used to traveling in comfort, with plenty of space and beautiful surroundings. Now they were being packed into cargo holds that had been hastily converted into passenger compartments. The conditions were cramped, ugly, frightening to beings who had never experienced hardship. Many Villani families refused to board the human ships, terrified of traveling in vessels that looked like they had survived battles. The human cargo hold smelled of metal, oil, and sweat. The lighting was harsh and industrial. Everything was designed for function rather than comfort, and the Villani found it deeply disturbing. Dr. Martinez worked with Harmony singer Veltar to convince reluctant families to board the evacuation ships. "I know our ships seem scary," she told a group of Villani parents who were clutching their children, "but they're built to survive in conditions that would destroy your beautiful vessels. They'll keep your families safe during the journey." "Children are frightened," one parent replied, their musical voice filled with distress. "They've never seen such harsh, ugly spaces. How can we ask them to live in such places for months?" "Because the alternative is death," Lisa said gently but firmly. "Our ships may not be beautiful, but they work. Your children will be alive when we reach the new world." The human crews made every effort to accommodate their passengers. Chief Medical Officer Laura Davis and her team set up medical stations throughout the ships. Learning how to treat Villani physiology on the fly, the aliens were more fragile than humans, with delicate bone structures that could be easily injured in the rough conditions of space travel. Medic Tony Garcia gave up his own quarters to house a Villani family with young children. When other crew members asked why, he simply said, "They need the space more than I do. I can sleep in a storage compartment." The generosity of the human crews confused the Villani almost as much as their roughness and efficiency. These beings who seemed so violent and dangerous were sacrificing their own comfort to help alien strangers. The contradiction was difficult for the peaceful aliens to understand. The real crisis came when solar storms began hitting the evacuation zone. The Villani ships, even with human modifications, could not withstand the increasing radiation and electromagnetic interference from their dying star. Several vessels suffered system failures that left them stranded with thousands of passengers aboard. Lieutenant Katie Foster launched an immediate rescue mission in her military ship. The conditions in the storm zone were deadly, with radiation levels that would kill most galactic species in minutes. But Katie and her crew flew directly into the storm to reach the stranded ships. "Radiation levels are at lethal intensity," her co-pilot warned as they approached the first disabled vessel. "We can't stay out here long, even with our shielding. We stay until everyone is safe," Katie replied, maneuvering the Defender close. To the Villani ship, "Prepare for emergency docking." The rescue operation required the human crew to work outside their ships in the full radiation of the solar storm. They wore heavy protective suits, but even with the best human technology, Prolonged exposure would be fatal. The Villani watched in amazement and terror as the humans risked their lives to save alien strangers. Engineer Sam Taylor worked for 3 hours in the radiation storm, manually repairing the damaged Villani ship's engines while cosmic rays bombarded. His protective suit, when he finally returned to the Defender, his radiation exposure was at dangerous levels. "Why did you do that?" asked the Villani engineer he had saved. "You could have died to save people you don't even know." Sam looked at the alien through his helmet visor. "'Cause you needed help," he said simply. "That's what people do for each other." As more ships failed in the increasing solar activity, Captain Carter made the difficult decision to redistribute passengers. The human vessels would have to carry far more Villani than originally planned. Cramming the aliens into every available space, the cargo holds of the human ships became refugee camps. Thousands of Villani families huddled together in spaces that had been designed to carry mining equipment or trade goods. The conditions were horrible by their standards, but they were alive. Danny Wright, the human pilot, found himself sharing his small quarters with a Villani family whose children had never seen a human up close. At first, the young aliens were terrified of him, hiding behind their parents whenever he entered the room. But over the days that followed, curiosity overcame fear. The children began asking questions about human technology, human culture, and the strange world called Earth. Danny taught them simple games and showed them pictures of his home planet. With its blue skies and green forests and dangerous animals, your world has creatures that hunt and eat other creatures? One young Villani asked, fascinated and horrified at the same time. "Yes," Danny replied, "but they're just animals. They don't think like we do. And humans learn to protect themselves and others from dangerous things. That's why we're good at rescue missions like this one." As the evacuation fleet finally departed, the dying system, the ships were packed far beyond their intended capacity. The human vessels carried 3 times their normal passenger load. While the modified Villani ships struggled with systems that were barely functioning after the hasty repairs, the journey ahead would take them through some of the most dangerous regions of space, past unstable stars, and through fields of cosmic radiation that would test the limits of both human engineering and Villani endurance. Many of the refugees were already suffering from the stress of leaving their beautiful world behind and living in the cramped, ugly conditions of the human ships. But they were alive. 40 million beings who would have died on their peaceful world were now traveling towards safety, carried by ships built by a species they had once considered monsters. The humans worked around the clock to keep the overloaded vessels functioning, sacrificing their own comfort and safety for passengers they barely knew. As the fleet settled into its long journey through hostile space, both species began to learn that survival sometimes required accepting help from the most unlikely sources. The Villani were discovering that beauty and gentleness were luxuries they could not afford in a dangerous universe, while the humans were learning that their strength came not from their ability to fight, but from their willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. The real test of both civilizations was just beginning as they faced the long journey through space that would either bring them safely to a new world or destroy them all in the attempt. 2 weeks into the journey to their new world, life aboard the human ships had settled into an uncomfortable but functional routine. The Villani refugees had stopped complaining about the cramped conditions and harsh lighting. They were beginning to understand that ugly and alive was better than beautiful and dead. Dr. Lisa Martinez walked through the cargo holds of the Dakota Belle, checking on the alien families housed there. What she saw surprised her. Villani children were playing games with pieces of human machinery, while their parents worked alongside human crew members to maintain the ship's systems. In one corner, she found engineer Sam Taylor teaching a group of young Villani how to repair a water recycling unit. The children's large eyes were bright with curiosity as they watched him work with simple tools to fix a complex problem. "The key is to understand what each part does," Sam was explaining to his eager students. "This filter removes harmful chemicals from the water. This pump moves the clean water to where people need it. If any part breaks, the whole system fails." One young Villani, who had told Sam his name was something that translated to Bright Song, raised his hand. On our ships, if something broke, we called special technicians who would replace the entire unit with a new artistic creation. We never learned to fix things ourselves. That works fine when you have plenty of resources and safe conditions, Sam replied. But out here, you have to know how to fix things with whatever you have available. Sometimes the repair isn't pretty, but it keeps everyone alive. The real change in relations between the species came when the convoy encountered pirates in the E. Kepler Nebula. The attackers were a species called the Korth, known throughout the galaxy for raiding refugee ships and selling survivors into slavery. Captain Amy Carter was on the bridge of the Dakota Belle when her sensors detected the approaching ships. "Katie, we've got company," she called to Lieutenant Foster on the Defender. 6 vessels, moving fast, definitely not friendly. The Villani ships immediately began broadcasting surrender signals, as their peaceful culture had taught them to do when faced with aggression. But the humans had a very different response to the threat. "All civilian ships, this is Carter," Amy announced over the fleet communication system. "Move to the center of our formation and prepare for defensive action. Military and mining vessels, form a protective screen around the refugees." The Villani passengers aboard the human ships panicked when they heard this announcement. They had never experienced violence or warfare, and the idea that their rescuers were preparing to fight terrified them more than the approaching pirates. Harmony singer Veltar, who was aboard the Dakota Belle, rushed to the bridge to speak with Captain Carter. "You cannot fight them," he pleaded. "Violence only leads to more violence. We must try to reason with them, find a peaceful solution." Amy looked at the alien leader with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "Veltar, these pirates don't want to reason with us. They want to capture your people and sell them as slaves. The only language they understand is force." "But surely all intelligent beings can be reasoned with," Veltar insisted. "There must be something they want that we can give them without fighting." "What they want is your people," Amy replied firmly. "And that's not something we're going to give them." The battle began when the Korth ships opened fire on the convoy. The pirates expected easy targets, refugee ships that would surrender immediately when faced with superior firepower. Instead, they found themselves facing human vessels that fought back with deadly efficiency. Lieutenant Katie Foster led the Defender and 2 mining ships in a coordinated attack on the pirate formation. The human ships moved with precision, using tactics developed through generations of warfare and survival in dangerous environments. The Villani refugees watched in amazement and horror as the humans fought to protect them. The battle was brief but intense, with energy weapons lighting up the darkness of space. When it was over, 3 pirate ships had been destroyed, and the other 3 were fleeing in different directions. But the victory came at a cost: the mining ship Rocky Mountain had taken severe damage, and 2 human crew members had been killed in the fighting. The Villani, who had never experienced death through violence, were deeply shaken by the loss of life. Dr. Martinez found herself comforting a group of Villani children who had witnessed the battle. "Why did those people have to die?" asked Brightsong, tears flowing from his large eyes. "Why couldn't everyone just talk and find a peaceful solution?" Lisa struggled to find words that would make sense to beings who had never known conflict. "Sometimes there are people who choose to hurt others," she said gently. "When that happens, good people have to be willing to fight to protect innocent lives. The humans who died today saved thousands of your people from slavery or death." "It's so sad," the young Villani said. "On our world, no one ever hurt anyone else. We didn't even hurt animals for food. How can beings who are capable of such violence also be capable of such kindness?" The question haunted Lisa as she continued her rounds through the ship. How could she explain to peaceful beings that humans had learned to be dangerous precisely because they chose to use that danger to protect others rather than to harm them? The answer came from an unexpected source. Veltar approached her in the ship's small medical bay, where she was helping treat injured crew members from the damaged mining ship. "I have been thinking about what happened today," the Villani leader said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I watched one group of beings deliberately harm another group. But I also watched beings choose to risk their lives to protect strangers they had never met before. Lisa looked up from the human engineer. She was helping bandage. What conclusion have you reached? That perhaps we have been naive, Veltar admitted. We built our civilization on the assumption that all intelligent beings would choose peace and cooperation. But the universe contains species like these pirates who choose to take rather than give, to harm rather than help. And, Lisa prompted, perhaps the universe also needs species like yours, who are willing to stand between the harmless and the harmful, even at the cost of your own lives. Over the following weeks, the relationship between humans and Villani continued to evolve. The aliens began to understand that human strength came not from a love of violence, but from a willingness to use violence as a last resort to protect those who could not protect themselves. Young Villani, like Brightsong, started learning more than just engineering from their human teachers. They learned about concepts like courage, sacrifice, and the responsibility that came with power. They discovered that being able to fight was meaningless unless you also knew when not to fight. The human crew members, in turn, learned from the Villani about art, beauty, and the importance of maintaining culture and hope even in difficult circumstances. The aliens' music and storytelling helped ease the stress of the long journey for everyone aboard the ships. When the convoy finally reached the new world that the humans had chosen for the Villani, both species had been changed by their experiences. Together, the planet was not as beautiful as Serenity Prime had been. But it was safe and had everything needed to support Villani life. As the evacuation ships landed and began unloading their passengers, Vellante stood with Captain Carter on a hill overlooking the landing site. Thousands of Villani were emerging from the crude human transports, setting foot on solid ground for the first time in months. It's not home, Veltar said sadly as he watched his people beginning to set up temporary shelters. No, Amy agreed, but it's a place where your people can build a new home. This time, they'll know how to protect it. The humans spent several more weeks helping the Villani establish their first settlements on the new world. They taught the aliens practical skills for survival, showed them how to build structures that could withstand natural disasters, and helped them establish communication systems to coordinate their scattered population. When it came time for the human ships to depart, the farewell was very different from their first meeting. Thousands of Villani gathered to see off their rescuers and many of the children who had learned from human. Crew members cried as their teachers prepared to leave. Brightsong approached Sam Taylor with a small gift, a piece of crystalline art that he had created using both Villani artistic techniques and human engineering principles. I want you to have this, the young alien said, to remember that beauty and function can work together. Sam accepted the gift with tears in his eyes. I'll treasure it always, he promised, and I'll remember that some of the best students I ever had were from a world I'd never heard of before. As the human ships departed, they left behind a changed civilization. The Villani had learned that the universe could be dangerous, but they had also learned that it contained protectors, as well as predators. They began developing their own defensive capabilities, not to conquer others, but to ensure that they would never again be helpless in the face of threat. Word of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy, carried by the Galactic Peaceful Alliance. Ships that finally arrived to find the Villani already safe on their new world. The story of the Deathworlders who had risked everything to save strangers became legend. Among the peaceful species of known space,